Finally, our closing keynote speaker is Jennifer Morris, speaking about unlocking imagination. She's the president of Conservation International. She's been working in conservation internationally as well as economic development for over 20 years. Before Conservation International, she worked for Women's World Banking. She lived in Japan, Bolivia, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. So quite a diverse experience bringing to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer.
I've been coming here for the past 10 years, and this morning I was walking outside of my parents' place near, just south of here near Haley, and I was reminded of the incredible beauty of this place. For those of you that haven't come here, it really is a magical place. It's a place that I come every year with my family to really hear the sound of the mountains, to dream big dreams, and sometimes come up with very big new ideas. I mean, we can hear you whispering into the mic back there. So what we need today, as we know, is we need these big ideas. And Sun Valley and the Sun Valley Forum is a fantastic place to do that. The reason we need these big ideas is pretty obvious. So the IPCC report that came out, the 1.5 degree report, it didn't really tell us anything new except for one very important thing. It put us all on a collective countdown clock. We know the problems are severe, but now we know that we actually have really just a little over 10 years, a decade, to change the course of this planet in order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. But what's brilliant about a crisis is it really focuses the human mind and figuring out new ways to do things. Necessity truly is the mother of invention and of unlocking our imagination to see things in a different way. And sometimes doing that requires asking a simple but somewhat profound question. What if? So my colleagues at Conservation International, we focus on several things. One of those things is the importance of climate, of nature for climate. So while understanding the way we produce energy is extremely important, if every single person on this planet went fossil fuel free tomorrow, we would still not achieve our collective goals under Paris. Why is that? That's because of the vast amounts of carbon emissions that's emitted through land conversion, and particularly tropical deforestation for agriculture and aquaculture. In fact, if emissions from nature were a country, it would be the third largest emitter after China and the United States. So my colleagues working in 27 countries, 1,100 staff around the world, we focus on protecting and restoring those parts of nature that are most important and have the most carbon value in their ecosystems. And those are large-scale tropical forests, mangroves, and peat swamps. While protecting these forests and these ecosystems is incredibly important, it's also critical that we focus on protecting the ocean. In fact, every year, 25% of carbon emissions are actually absorbed by our oceans. But unfortunately, our oceans are, as we all know, overexploited and overfished. In fact, scientists believe that we need about 30% of the ocean to be conserved in order to maintain the ecological health, as well as to provide enough fish for the 3 billion people on the planet that rely on fish as their main source of protein. Well, unfortunately, right now we're about 10%. So we need to get to 30, and we're at about 10%, generously at 10%. Now, one of the challenges is that the global community has really underinvested in marine conservation compared to conservation on land. So we have to do a lot more. About 2 years ago, I was actually here in Sun Valley, vacationing with my family, and I was thinking about this challenge. I'd just been selected as the president of Conservation International, along with my colleague, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sanjan. And we were thinking about the challenges in the marine conservation space and why had it been so underinvested. Well, for those of you that are in this won't come as a surprise, but the egos in the marine conservation space would make Donald Trump smile. There are a lot of very intense organizations and intense people who often compete for scarce donor dollars around ocean conservation. So, but we knew that given the challenge of getting to 30% was going to require radical partnerships. Partnerships with organizations that we really saw as our competitors. But we said, you know what? We have to do it. We have to put aside those historical challenges and infighting and actually work together to do something big. So I naively, as a new president, walked over to some of our competitors and said, hey, why don't we work together on big-scale marine conservation? Some of them are like, who's this crazy young lady? What is she doing? But one of them actually said, okay, we don't always see eye to eye on how we do conservation, but let's sit down and ask the simple question, what if? What if we could actually double the amount of ocean under conservation, some sort of protection? And what if we could do it by the year 2025? So faster than it's ever been done before. Well, I'm happy to say 2 years later, this fall, we will be launching the world's biggest single fund dedicated to ocean conservation. And that's with a partner who everyone said, there's no way you can work together. But we are. And we're doing it because unlocking imagination and creating this kind of change is really needed. The goal of this partnership, when it's launched, will be to double the size of oceans under protection. That equates to 18 million square kilometers, or almost double the size of the United States. So this is huge. Now, protecting forests and oceans is very important to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. But in the 27 countries in which Conservation International works, many of them are small island states. And climate change is not something on the horizon. Climate change is happening now, especially on small island nations. Finding clean drinking water is becoming a huge problem in many of the places where Conservation International works. That's because sea levels are rising, and freshwater wells are being inundated by seawater, and those wells are becoming more brackish and unsafe to drink. Now, this is a problem especially during the dry season, because during the rainy season, people collect rainwater into huge rain barrels, and they can use that for drinking. But in the dry season, when those rainwater barrels are emptied and the well waters are brackish, it's very difficult to find clean water. In fact, they often have to resort to buying plastic bottled water in a very expensive way because it's extremely expensive to ship water to many of these islands. Now, many of the communities that we work with are slowly experimenting with desalination. So you may think desalination is fantastic, and this will be great. We can just take seawater, take out the salt, and it'll be fresh. Well, there's a lot of challenges with desalination, in particular in small communities. And those challenges are simply, one, the infrastructure is expensive, the operational costs are quite high, and quite honestly, in many small communities, the volumes of water are too much it's too much for these communities to absorb. So it's really not a great solution in many communities. So I was recently in East Timor on an island called Atoro Island. And we sat down with some community members there after we were looking at desalination and thinking, this just isn't going to work. And we thought, what if there's something else? What if we can unlock imagination and technology and actually make drinking water from air using the power of the sun? Crazy? Well, I'm happy to say that there's actually a much crazier technologist who came up with a solution. And it's a company based in Arizona. It's called Zero Mass Water. And they are pioneering something called hydro panels, source hydro panels. And so they not only answered yes to this question, but they've actually deployed this technology in over 23 countries. So we partnered with them on the island that I was on, and just 2 weeks ago, we installed these, the first ever hydro panels on a small island. This this array right here, which is in a community which has agreed to set aside to do marine conservation through community monitoring, they now are extremely water stressed. And this particular array here will produce 140 of these per day, but not using plastic. They're going to be using reusable, sustainable bottles that they will be provided by participating in the program. This is a game changer for this community. And we're hoping that this will be the pilot that we can actually use not only throughout this island and East Timor, but also on other islands that are extremely water stressed. So I gave you 2 examples in radical partnerships, unlocking imagination in partnerships, and in technology. The next one I want to talk about is in communications. So Conservation International has taken communications very, very seriously. As many of you know that are in this space, often environmentalists are just in an echo chamber, talking to ourselves, nodding vigorously at different conferences like, yes, yes, yes. But we're missing so many audiences. So in addition to pioneering virtual reality, which I really would encourage you to go across the street, we have 3 beautiful films, which Amy mentioned to you. I just rewatched the one from Africa, which was a Tribeca finalist, and it's absolutely amazing. It's narrated by Lupita Nyong'o, and it's a beautiful story of human-wildlife conflict in northern Kenya. You can go under the ocean in Indonesia, and you can go into the rainforest under the canopy in the Amazon. They're really special films. But in addition to doing that, about 5 years ago, we teamed up with a genius marketing firm in Los Angeles called Media Arts Lab. And we really wanted to change the conversation about climate change and about nature. And we asked a simple question: what if nature could actually speak to humans? What would she say? And what if we paired up aspects of nature, so air and ocean and mountains, with some A-list celebrities that would really draw the attention of new audiences? So people like Harrison Ford, Reese Witherspoon, Penelope Cruz, to name a few. And I'm happy to say 5 years later, this campaign called Nature is Speaking has been viewed over 100 million times. We have translated into 10 languages using local stars from those countries, and have given voice to 12 different aspects of nature using 50 international stars. So this all started by asking the question, what if we could do things, communicate the challenges of nature conservation in a different way? And it's been incredibly successful. And I'm going to show you one of these in closing. This is one of my favorites. And the reason I wanted to show you this one, so this is Robert Redford talking to his granddaughter. Robert Redford is a mature redwood, and he is talking to his daughter, who's a little baby redwood. And they had this beautiful dialogue. And the reason I love this one so much, and I think it's especially poignant for today, is that it's a wake-up call, reminder to all of us in the room that what we do over the next 10 years, this critical decade, in terms of addressing climate change, will allow us to look our children and our grandchildren in the eye and say confidently that we did everything we could to leave the future in a better place. And with that, enjoy the film.
How come you're so smart?
Kid, I've been around a really long time. As a matter of fact, our kind has been around longer than just about anything. I've seen just about everything.
Really? Like what?
Well, I've seen weather. All kinds of weather.
And lots of critters?
Yeah? At first there were just some bugs and spiders, then some mice and rats, and some rabbits and bears, and skunks. Then, all of a sudden, there were humans. And all hell broke loose.
Why? What did the humans do?
Well, they changed wolves into dogs, rivers into lakes, and us into wood. They started using the planet like it was put there just for them. Act like they've got an extra one laying around.
Why do they do that? Why don't they understand?
I don't know. If they don't figure out that they're part of nature rather than just using nature, they probably won't be around to see you grow up.